There's something about being alone in a house at night that makes everything feel more intense. Every little noise seems louder, every shadow seems darker, and every creak of the floorboard sounds like footsteps. But what if it isn't just your imagination? What if someone or something is really there? That's what I learned the hard way. I'm Emily, and this is the story of how I found out that sometimes you're never really alone. I had just moved into my new house. It was a small, cozy place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but perfect for me. After years of living in a crowded city, surrounded by noise and chaos, I needed a change. This little house with its white picket fence and peaceful surroundings felt like the fresh start I was craving. I was excited to have a place of my own, a sanctuary away from the chaos of work and life. The first few weeks were amazing. I unpacked my things, decorated the rooms, and enjoyed the quiet. It was exactly what I needed to recharge. I loved how peaceful it was. No honking horns, no loud neighbors, just silence. And honestly, I thought I could live like this forever. But one night, everything changed. It started out like any other evening. I was sitting on the couch, watching TV after a long day at work. The house was quiet, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the television. The darkness outside was complete, the only light in the room coming from the screen. I was used to this stillness by now, and it was comforting. But then something happened, something that made my skin crawl. It started with a faint sound, a tap. At first it was so soft I thought it might be the wind. I paused the TV and listened carefully. The sound stopped. I sighed, shaking my head. Just a branch, I told myself. That was the only explanation I could come up with. Maybe the wind had knocked a branch against the window. But then it happened again. This time it was louder. It wasn't just a soft tap. It was more deliberate. A quick, sharp knocking. It came from the window. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly got up from the couch and walked over to the window. I peered outside, but all I saw was the empty street and the dim glow of the streetlights. There was nothing there. No one. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. My mind was racing. Could someone be playing a prank on me? No, I didn't have time for this. I shrugged it off, but the feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. I turned away from the window and walked back toward the living room. But just as I was about to sit down again, I heard it. The tapping. This time it wasn't from the window. It was coming from upstairs. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My heart started to pound. It wasn't the wind this time, I was sure of it. It sounded too deliberate, too calculated. Someone or something was up there. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sarah, my best friend. "Sarah, I think someone's in my house," I whispered, my voice trembling with fear. "Call the police, Emily," Sarah urged, her voice filled with panic. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. It was suffocating. I stood there, my hand still gripping my phone, my legs frozen in place. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. And then, just when I thought the silence was unbearable, I heard something even worse. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I could hear them clearly, each step coming closer, moving. Down the stairs above me. My blood ran cold, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, I couldn't think. I just stood there listening as the footsteps grew louder, closer. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, and then they stopped. I held my breath, straining my ears to hear any sound. I stared at the doorway, unable to look away. The silence seemed to stretch forever. And then I saw it. A shadow moving across the wall. My heart stopped. The shadow was dark and long, stretching across the room as if something was walking in front of it. It wasn't mine. I was standing still. It was something else. Something that shouldn't be there. Panic flooded my body. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. Without thinking, I turned and bolted for the front door. I didn't care that I wasn't fully dressed. I didn't care about anything except getting out. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely open the door. But when I did, I ran. I didn't stop until I reached Mrs. Patterson's house next door. I knocked on the door, frantic. Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor, opened the door with puzzled expression. "Emily, what's going on?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "There's someone in my house," I gasped. I heard footsteps. I saw a shadow. Her face softened, but she looked confused. "Sweetheart, it's late." "What do you mean, a shadow? "Are you sure you're okay?" I couldn't explain it. I was shaking too hard. I just knew I couldn't go back into that house alone, not now, not after what I'd heard, after what I'd seen. The police arrived shortly after, and I told them everything. They searched the house from top to bottom, but they found nothing. No signs of an intruder, no broken windows, no open doors, nothing. They said it was probably just my imagination. Maybe I'd heard an animal in the attic or a branch hitting the roof, but I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had seen. No amount of reassurance from the officers would make it go away. I couldn't go back to that house, not by myself. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper. The house felt wrong, as though something was waiting for me, lurking in the shadows just out of sight. For weeks after that night, I couldn't bring myself to go back to my house alone. Every time I thought about it, I heard the tapping in my mind. I saw the shadow on the wall. I felt the footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward me. Sometimes when I was alone in my apartment, I would hear the faint tapping sound again, as if it was calling to me. It would echo in my head louder and louder until I couldn't escape it. Even now, I swear I can still hear it, faint and distant, tapping from the walls of that house. I haven't been back there since that night. I couldn't. The house stands empty now, dark and silent, and I have no intention of going back. But sometimes late at night when the world is still, I can hear the faint tapping in the back of my mind. Maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe it's not, but I'll never know for sure. All I know is that sometimes you're never really alone, even when you think you are, and whatever was in that house, it's still there. Have you ever moved into a new place and thought, "This is perfect, just what I need"? That was me, Mark, the day I stepped into my new apartment. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. A charming old Victorian house turned into flats, the kind that people like to romanticize in stories. High ceilings, intricate woodwork, and windows that let in just enough light to make everything feel warm and alive. But what I didn't realize was that this house wasn't just old in age. It was old in spirit too, more ancient than I could ever imagine. When I first walked through those creaky hallways, I thought it was the quiet, sleepy charm of an old building that drew me in. The way the floors creaked as if they were telling tales from 100 years ago. Everything about it felt alive. I moved in with little thought, thinking the worst thing that could happen was an occasional squeak in the floorboards. Boy, was I wrong. It wasn't until that first night that things started to get strange. I had just finished unpacking, placing my books on the shelf, setting up my bed, and opening a bottle of wine to celebrate. The apartment was cozy, but as night fell, the place started to feel heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. The creaking and groaning of the old house felt almost too deliberate, too rhythmic. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling, but something didn't feel right. Something was watching me. I brushed it off, climbed into bed, and tried to get some sleep. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I heard it. A whisper. It was so soft, almost imperceptible, but I swear I heard it. A faint voice, like someone was standing just outside my bedroom door, murmuring something I couldn't quite make out. I sat up, my heart suddenly racing. I listened closely, but the voice stopped. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind, or maybe the old pipes. My mind was probably playing tricks on me, but that night I couldn't sleep. Every small noise seemed to make me jump. Every shadow felt like it was moving. The next evening I tried to shake off the unease. I made myself some dinner, watched a little TV, and convinced myself I was being paranoid. I had just moved in after all. Everything felt unfamiliar, but as night fell again, the whispers returned. This time the voice was clearer, more distinct. "Help me." It wasn't a loud cry, it wasn't even a scream, it was just a whisper, a quiet plea that sent chills running down my spine. I shot up from my bed and glanced around the room. The windows were locked, the door was shut, the apartment was empty. "Hello?" I called out nervously, but the room remained silent. I stood there for a moment, heart hammering in my chest, waiting for a response. But nothing came. I told myself that it was just my imagination, maybe the sound of the house settling, or perhaps it was the wind creeping through the cracks in the old walls. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That whisper was too real. Night after night, the whisper grew louder. It no longer felt like it was coming from outside the walls. It felt like it was inside the very fabric of the apartment, echoing from the wood, from the floors, from the air around me. I couldn't escape it. Help me, please. Every night, it was the same. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even think straight. It was as though the house itself was alive, breathing, whispering. The sound seemed to follow me, growing more insistent with every passing hour. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight, my heart racing as I ventured through the apartment, determined to find the source of the voice. The walls seemed to close in around me as I searched each room, turning over every chair, checking every closet. But there was no one. No one was there. Just empty rooms and the faint sound of breathing. Was it mine? Or was it the house? I was ready to call it quits and head back to my bed when I heard it again, right behind me. Help me, please. This time, the whisper was different. It wasn't just a soft request anymore. It was desperate, urgent, like it was coming from someone who was in pain, someone who needed saving. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I called out shakily, but the voice didn't respond. The silence that followed was worse. Then the whispers. I felt like the walls themselves were closing in around me. That was when I decided to do something I had hoped I'd never have to do. I went to the landlord. Mr. Allen was an elderly man who lived on the ground floor. His face was always pale, his eyes always darting around as if he was afraid of being caught. When I told him about the whispers, he didn't seem surprised. In fact, he looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for me to say something. "You're not the first," he said in a low voice, glancing over his shoulder as if afraid someone might overhear. "The previous tenant. She heard them too." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "What do you mean? What happened to her?" I asked, trying to stay calm, though my hands were shaking. He lowered his voice to a whisper. "She disappeared. One night she just vanished. The police searched for her, but they never found anything. Her room was untouched, her things still in place. No one knows what happened. But I've heard the whispers too, Mark. You're not imagining it." I felt my stomach turn. My pulse quickened. Something was terribly wrong. Why had I moved into this apartment? Why hadn't I listened to my gut when I first stepped inside? That night, the whispers were worse than ever before. They were no longer a mere request. They were frantic, pleading for help. "Help me, please help me, I'm here." I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. The voice, no, the entity, was real. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. Something had happened here, something terrible, and the spirits of the past were trapped in these walls, reaching out to me for help. I tried to leave. I packed my things, but the whispers followed me, louder, angrier. As I walked out of my apartment, the door slammed shut behind me as if the house itself was trying to keep me in. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I wandered the streets, lost in a daze. That night I stayed with a friend and the whispers finally stopped, but they never left my mind. Weeks passed. I never returned to that apartment. The building sat empty, abandoned, but the stories remained. I heard that a new tenant had moved in. I couldn't help but wonder, did they hear the whispers too, or were they just too afraid to speak up like I had been? I've never returned to that house, not once. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, alone in the silence of my own home, I hear it. That faint whisper. It's soft, just like it used to be. Like it's calling me, still begging for help. I don't know if it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but I can't shake the feeling that sometimes the walls really do talk. And when they do, you can never be sure if what you're hearing is the past, reaching out to you, or if it's something far more sinister. I wish I could tell you the truth of what happened to that place, but I don't think anyone really knows. Some things are better left unheard. Have you ever felt like you're being watched? Like there's something in the room with you? Something you can't see but you know is there? You don't just sense it in your mind, but deep in your bones. This isn't some simple imagination. This is real. It's the kind of thing that sends a chill crawling down your spine, and once you feel it, it never really leaves. My name is Lisa, and this is my story. The story of how I learned that sometimes, the things you can't see are the most dangerous. It was the time I moved into an apartment that should have been perfect. It was my first real step into independence. A beautiful loft, big windows, the kind of space that made you feel like you could breathe. I had dreamed of living here for years, and when I finally signed the lease, I thought I had it all: freedom, space, and a new start. At first, everything was great. I unpacked my boxes, set up my furniture, and spent hours enjoying the view from my new window. The sun streamed in, filling the room with warmth, and it was exactly what I had envisioned. I was living the dream, but that dream would soon turn into a nightmare. It started small. The first night I spent there, I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, trying to wind down. The apartment was eerily quiet, with only the sound of distant cars driving by. As I lay there, something felt off. It was subtle at first, a strange tingling on the back of my neck, a coldness in the air. I shrugged it off. The apartment was old after all. It was probably just the air conditioning or maybe a draft from the window. But then it happened again the next night, and the next. It wasn't just the feeling of being watched. It was a sense of presence, something that couldn't be explained. Every night, as soon as the lights went off and the darkness settled in, the unease grew. It started in the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the longer I stared, the more I realized that the shadows in that corner were wrong. They didn't move like shadows should. They were thick, almost solid, and they seemed to stretch out toward me as though they were alive. Every night they grew darker, more defined, like they were watching me, waiting. I told myself it was nothing. I was tired, adjusting to a new place, but I couldn't ignore the way the shadows seemed to shift and stretch, as if they were reaching for me. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but no matter how many times I turned on the light, they never disappeared. The shadows would always come back, and as they did, the coldness in the room would intensify. It was the kind of cold that you could feel on your skin, like a chill that seeped into your very bones. It wasn't normal, it wasn't natural, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was never truly alone in that apartment. The walls seemed to press in on me, the air thick with an invisible weight that made it hard to breathe. I knew something was there, hiding in the corner of my room. Something I couldn't see, but I could feel it, always watching me. A few days into this strange experience, I reached out to my best friend, Sarah. I had to talk to someone. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. When I told her what was happening, she didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she looked at me with wide eyes and said, "You need to get out of there, Lisa. You don't know what's in that apartment." Tried to dismiss her concern. "It's just the shadows. It's just me being paranoid," I said, but I could see the worry in her face. "It's not normal, Lisa. Shadows don't act like that. I'm serious. You should get someone to come. Check it out." She suggested I call a priest, but I didn't believe in that kind of thing. Ghosts, demons, and all that. It wasn't real. At least I didn't think so. Still, the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. What if she was right? What if I wasn't just imagining things? I knew I had to confront whatever was in that room. It had been weeks and I couldn't take it anymore. That night I made a decision. I was going to face the shadow. I wasn't going to run from it. I sat on my bed staring at the corner of the room, watching the shadow stretch across the walls. I waited for it to happen. I wanted to know what it was, what it wanted. And when it finally came, it was worse than I could have ever imagined. It started with a flicker. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then it moved, like a living thing, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to pulse with energy. My heart stopped as I stared at it. The shadow was shifting, changing shape. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was something more, something alive. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "What do you want?" For a moment, nothing happened. The shadow seemed to freeze as though it were contemplating me. Then, as if it had decided, it lunged toward me. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was like something tangible, wrapping around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if my voice had been stolen by the very darkness itself. I was suffocating, unable to move, trapped in the grip of something I couldn't even see clearly. My vision blurred, my head spun, and I thought I was going to die right there in my bed. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I woke up. I was lying in my bed, gasping for air. The room was warm, the sunlight pouring in through the window. It was a bright, sunny morning and I could hear the sounds of birds outside. I was sweating, my heart racing. I told myself it was just a nightmare, a bad dream, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The feeling, that presence, it lingered in the room with me. I wasn't alone. It was still there. I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I packed my things, told myself it was just a bad experience, and left. I found a new place, far away from that loft, far from the shadow that haunted me. But even after I moved, the feeling didn't go away. At night, when I lay in my new bed, I could still feel it, the coldness, the weight of unseen eyes watching me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could almost hear it, just on the edge of my consciousness, whispering my name. I thought I had escaped, but the shadow was still with me. Wherever I went, it followed. And now, every time I walk into a dark room, I feel that familiar chill crawl across my skin. I don't know if it's real or if I'm just losing my mind, but the one thing I know for sure is this: some things are better left unseen. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched, that I haven't truly escaped. The shadow is out there somewhere waiting, and sometimes in the dark of the night when I close my eyes, I hear it. I'm still here. And whisperers, that concludes today's journey into the world of the unknown. These chilling tales remind us that sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones we can see, but the ones we can't. The shadows, the whispers, and the inexplicable sensations that stay with us long after the lights go out. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with friends who dare to hear the truth, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are you brave enough to face the unseen? Make sure you're subscribed to Mr. Whisperer for more terrifying stories that will keep you awake at night. And if you haven't turned on notifications yet, do it now so you never miss a story that will send shivers down your spine. Remember, the world is filled with mysteries and we're here to uncover them, one story at a time. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.